some asshole that's going to troll. That's the real problem for her. I mean, I don't know what. Yeah. By the way, folks, good evening. This is Divided We Stand. Dave and I were just talking about. If you haven't heard, Environmental Coffee House, Sandy, her channel on YouTube suspended her. Just out of awful, complete bullshit. Just complete bullshit. And this goes to show you what can happen when the wrong person does some bullshit, and then you have a company with algorithms. Really, really sad. So please support Environmental Coffee House, okay? In any way you can, whether you have to just go to Facebook or complain to YouTube. I don't know what to do. I just know there's some asshole out there. So Dave and I are suggesting you please get involved to help Sandy out, because that is some shit. So again, this is Divided We Stand. It's Sunday, the 8th of June, and geez, time just does not stop. It's 8:07 in Bridge, New Jersey, via Arlington, Virginia. If you're not familiar with this page, we are on YouTube, and we ask that you become a subscriber. We are not a monetized channel, so we're not looking for money or anything like that. Also, if you are on Facebook, we have a private group page called, appropriately enough, Divided We Stand. A couple questions, you don't have to answer them. We do kind of scour the profiles of people who are joining to make sure that they're legit. We haven't had any problems for a while, so that's a good thing. So please consider joining. We all have to work together. This is not something you got to wait for somebody else to do. You have to do it, and I have to do it. Let's do it together. All right? So, Dave Price, Arlington, Virginia. Dave, what's up with Dave Price and his world?
Well, it is very busy here in Washington, D.C., as you could imagine. We've talked before about Trump as a newsmaker, and he has the ability, or the disability, I don't know which way, or the inability, some ability there, to just make news story after news story after news story. Now, so let's just real quick look at what happened last week, basing it just in Washington, D.C., where Trump resides. As I pointed out before, exactly 4.6 miles from where I live. So I can't quite spit there, but I can get there pretty quickly. So this today ends a 3-week period that D.C. was host to International Pride. Okay. And of course, what that is just like the name says. It's Pride, in this case, 3 weeks. But Pride celebrated internationally. And just like the Olympics rotate, right? We get a rotation, and it was here. Now, we don't have the figures in, Brian, but it is estimated originally, when this was put together, that there would be approximately 3 million visitors to Washington, D.C. just for Pride. Okay. The report, as of the beginning of Pride Week 3 weeks ago, is they expected less than 2 million, and it may be a lot less than that when it's said and done. What's the reason? Donald Trump and his take on the idea of gay men and women. So you had that. So there's Trump costing Washington, D.C. area whatever 1 million people would bring into an area. All right. So that's one thing. Then this Saturday, June 6th, I went to the mall, not the retail mall, but the National Mall, and hung out with veterans who, to say the least, are very upset. And Brian, I don't know how you feel about veterans. I know how I feel. I think if any Americans should get special treatment, it is the veterans. They served, good, bad, or indifferently. Some did not come back. Some were injured. So among the stories that I heard with these cuts that now may or may not happen, that's another thing we want to talk about tonight. Mm-hmm. Just the idea of make a decision and fucking stay with it, which he's unable to do. I was talking to one gentleman, and I can't remember, Brian, whether it was Fort Lauderdale or Jacksonville. It was not Miami and not Orlando. He had just been 3 days before because he is a regular frequenter he is a veteran and has some things, and that's really who takes care of his health. And he was able to see his provider, but they had shut down entirely the Crippled Wounded Warriors program. So if you had any injury or amputee, they could not service you in that, and you had to drive however many miles it was to the next opening. And eventually, probably, if it continues, there may not be VA. And so obviously, really, really poignant stories. Another one was, it was kind of interesting, even through all this bad, there's always good. A father and a daughter got together. The father was from Indiana, the daughter was from California. She flew and they met to protest. But these are the people, what I was saying there, like I said, they should be treated special, not second-class citizens. The biggest concern, of course, was their belief, and I share that belief, that they're trying to privatize all health services. And we know where that will lead. I talked to a nurse who had been a veterans nurse for 30 years. And she said, I don't know every day. I'm not sure who will be there. I'm not sure. She said, I will probably be there because, I'll close the doors. She's been there long enough. She also made a very good point, Brian, too, that a lot of the problems that veterans deal with are specific to veterans, right? I mean, we all get, what is it, PSTD, now we can, but it's combat is something else. And these kinds of things. Drug addiction is high. We know that the homeless rate is high. And so these VA workers get special. It would be like, Brian, I guess the best thing would be like if you were teaching in a school that was among the richest in America, you would not learn how to handle poor kids.
Right.
You wouldn't have that occasion. And experience is important. Well, this is kind of the opposite. They can bring people in, but you're losing all this experience of how to handle things. There are some good things now that come out of this. Music, we can talk about that maybe next show. Maybe we'll touch on it tonight. But that's starting to come forward like it did in the 60s and the early 70s. Band the Dropkick Murphys, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're taking a very active stand against Trump. They were there to perform gratis, free of charge. But who do we blame for that? Donald Trump. All right, so that's another thing. Now, of course, the two biggest stories, I would say, unless you see otherwise, I would say, of course, is the end of the bromance, or at least the potential end of the bromance between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And the second, and maybe the most important story since Donald Trump has become president, is what's going on currently in Los Angeles. And basically what's going on is Donald Trump is illegally and improperly ordering National Guard troops who are not technically under his command unless they're federalized, right? It's the state governor's position to call them in to handle what Trump is calling rioters and looters, and even the LAPD, who we know does not have the greatest reputation, is saying they're just protesters. So certainly, if you were looking at Facebook, you saw a lot of different pictures of what's going on, all disturbing as hell. Then you've got a lot of, I don't know if you saw them, a lot of the Kent State pictures resurfaced. This is what, nobody died yet that we know of, but it will go on. And of course, Brian, the problem, like I said, I've been around protesters either being one or covering them since 1968. That's quite a few years. And one of the things is you really can't control a protest. So while everybody's intent may to be nonviolent, it's pretty hard to be nonviolent if you see somebody being clubbed or beaten or taken away. And that's where we are. Now, the only thing that surprises me is the fact that we got to fascism as quickly as we did. Mm-hmm. There has been no person with power in government to stand up and say, well, now the courts, at least at the federal level, have been doing pretty well, but Trump just ignores them. That's what a fascist did. I don't know if you saw today, it's been around before, 15 main signs of fascism. Of course, a lot of that based on Hitler kind of thing. But Donald Trump has already touched all 15 bases, has put it in motion. So what do you think what was the big story? Where should the focus be? I mean, you could put it wherever you want. I mean,
Well, I think
they're all deserving, but
they all. I mean, you would think that Musk and Trump would be the big story, but I actually think the one you mentioned with the protests, because we don't know. That's the one that could, it's kind of like this, the spark that could light a wheat field, so that you don't know how far this thing's going to go. But there's a lot of energy out there, and a lot of the images that I saw, I could see how it's going to create tension. So, for example, the protesters. They're protesting the fact that ICE is coming in. Trump's calling the National Guard. Newsom's against that. We're getting into this thing like Kent State, except that we don't even have Jim Rhodes here as guard. We have Newsom, who doesn't want the National Guard there.
Right.
And then the image of what we saw a lot of Mexican flags out there. I think that wasn't in great taste. If we're trying to make a point, we should all be out there. If you're in California, you're a liberal, and you're in that area, just protest the fact that we should not have the National Guard coming after people. I think that's the one that bothers me, because I think you could have satellite situations happening where this goes on. Trump's he's just calling out the heavies to do the work, and then once you start seeing the violence, if you see a cop shot or something like that, then all bets are off, and then this is where you start saying, like Kristallnacht, it becomes fascism.
Right.
And then you're not going to have the National Guard. What you're going to have is your motherfucker with a 150 come out, and the Kyle Rittenhouses, and they're going to start shooting people up. And Trump will either just pardon them all, a blanket pardon, or they just won't be arrested. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Right. I just think that there's a lot of energy in this thing, and it's not good. So I would think this is the number one.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Brian. I mean, it's all, people could say it's all part of a package. It is. But the one that has the most potential to turn deadly the quickest is indeed that one. Now, we do see that an innocent man, or judged innocent by the courts, was returned from the Salvadorian prison. However, he's been indicted already on the arrival. For something previous. It is clear, and anybody who doesn't see it, they're either stupid, hate-filled, something's wrong with them if you don't see it.
Well, Dave, you actually said it right. I mean, you're alluding to the fact that, having these people that he's hiring, and then you've got all of them are loyalists, and they're all ignorant, every single one. So as I've said before, these people are like bombs. And each one of them you just don't know when they're going to explode. No. Well, but the point is, they are going to explode. I mean, it's a metaphor, right, but it's going to happen.
No. Well, again, we'll just return briefly to the Musk-Trump thing. That was fascinating to watch, right? You knew, or anybody with any sense knew it was going to come. Because neither one of them can play second fiddle. There's no way. No way. So it came, and charges this, and he was that, and this was this, and what I found interesting is poor J.D. Vance, and I say that of course sarcastically. He's got to take a side, and he's in a bind. Trump, needs to be with Trump. Musk needs to be with Musk, because Musk is with Thiel, and Thiel runs J.D. Vance. So, try different things. And
it's sickening, Dave. It's just, I mean,
I know.
It's just sickening.
Well, and again, I don't know, Bri. Like I said, I was around during the Nixon years, and that was pretty bad, but it wasn't ever as bad as this. Okay, it wasn't. Now, I'm sure there are people out there that disagree with me, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that I will say in those years, I did experience tear gas in Washington, D.C., and that is not a pleasant feeling. It's not. I mean, it hurts, right? And you can get all the milk. You can get all the milk in the world to try to get a base on that, but it's there. Now, I like what T-Bone says here. The laws were made to keep the vulnerable in their place. I don't think there's any question that's true. We have this vision or this view or this belief in America. Well, do you know what? It wasn't that way from the beginning. Okay? Yes, it was nice. We'll get rid of the kings. But who do we put the government in place with? We're really oligarchs. That's where it started. Okay? George Washington was very wealthy. Now, he's sort of like a Dwight talk real well, don't I? A Dwight David Eisenhower person, in that he deserves all the accolades for leading the military to a successful victory and then became president. I don't think Washington set out to be president, just like I don't think Eisenhower set out to be president. But maybe one of the good things, if you go back and read their words and whatever, they were very conscious of what war can do. And they were pretty determined to try to keep the peace as much as they could. Now, Trump, with his bone spurs and his, what did he say, his battle, or his trying to avoid STDs was his Vietnam. That was his actual quote. He has no conception of this. I'm going to go on record now. I'm fairly convinced, not that it matters I go on record, but there's just too much. I don't even think he was shot, in the ear.
Right. I mean, I agree, because even the Epstein thing, Paul and I, when we did that video years ago, we were kind of pragmatic about it and said, well, it looks like, he could have, killed himself, and the guards just suck because sometimes they suck and they're lazy, or there's got to be more now. And again, I hate conspiracy theories. You do too. But this is really smelling right now, and it's just hard to believe. But now it's not, because this is why I see nothing but bad ahead of us.
Yeah. The only thing that would be, as I've said, and I will continue to say till the end, there are only two options that I see at this point. One is we become a full authoritarian, fascist, totalitarian, dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, state. That is one. And the other is that it gets so bad that when we are able, we the people, are able to get rid of it, we come back with something new and strong. But there's a big but to that. And I've said before, I think there are good Democrats, but I'm not a Democrat. I'm a liberal. There's a difference. And you say, what's the difference? Well, if tomorrow there was a Republican running in any election who was more liberal than a Democrat, I'd vote for that Republican. Number two, I do not believe the Democratic Party has some severe problems, many of which are reflected in their inability to fight Trump and their inability to get elected. One is they're too damn old. Okay. And I say that as a 73-year-old man.
Right.
I would prefer a 43-year-old with some energy coming in there. Certainly, I think
but they're playing the role of somebody who's old too. I mean, in other words, it's not just. I don't like to use ageism, but because they are acting like old farts, most of them, with the exception of White House and Sanders, and that's about it. You have young farts too, so you have to watch out for those.
Oh yeah. But what's interesting, and I wasn't really thinking about this till the other day I was reading, the average age, it's interesting. Look at the average age of Republicans in office and look at the average age of Democrats in office. And even to this point where, I mean, Biden was old and Trump is old, let's face it, okay? But even there, Biden was older than Trump. I mean, it just seems to be that way. And you get beholden to people. And I would say that the problem of us and them unfurls throughout American society. Pick whatever, and there's an us and there's a them. That's a huge problem. But I think as big a problem is the oligarchy. Look at what Elon Musk was able to do. Look at what, on a smaller scale, look what Jeff Bezos was able to do and continues to do. Now, we have a real problem with truth in this country. You cannot believe anything, Brian. You can't. And even the good guys, you're supposed to, I don't know if you're following that story about ABC News, where one of the reporters tweeted out a perfectly thought out, absolutely 100% factual, pejorative post on Stephen Miller, and ABC News suspended it. No one.
I know you had posted something. I actually didn't get a chance to check it out. I assume that's what you were alluding to.
No, and what that is no one should watch ABC News ever again. Now, I've said it on the show. I've said I've not watched TV news since 1976 to get my news, because TV news is a different animal. It's about ratings and showmanship and sales. Yes. Fox
And
News
the
is
news stories are very short too, so you don't get any type of depth to what you're saying.
Right, exactly. And so yes, you have Fox News and OAN and Newsmax, but even MSNBC, while we like them, right, if we're liberal, they have theirs, and look what they did. They got rid of Joy Reid, and I don't know if you saw, I believe I saw, if anybody can correct me on this, please let me know. But I think I saw, just in passing, I was going through Lawrence O'Donnell, when his contract is done, is not renewing.
That'd be a shame. I really like. Although Lawrence O'Donnell's kind of interesting, Dave. He puts the story together very, very well, but he gives you optimism every time. Like he's always make you feel like, oh, now is the time that Trump is going to be done in, and it just never happens. And as much as I like Lawrence O'Donnell, but he never really gets to the truth.
You have said consistently, and I didn't. Not that you weren't right. I just thought it would end. Trump is, no pun intended, the Teflon Don. Nothing ever seems to stick to him. Something comes along and saves him. Now, one thing that can't save him is age. You can't be saved from age. Okay, Joe Biden,
right?
And if you saw today, Trump tripped going up.
I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting.
Just before we came on, they posted some pictures. Now, anybody can do that. Okay, I know.
Yeah, but you know how it affects him though when he does it, because he's always worried about image.
Right. Well, yes, but I wonder how much those lifts in his shoes, and he does have lifts in his shoes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, to make him taller. That is not a good thing. And look, quite honestly, okay, so I said I was
maybe that's why he wanted his shoes when.
I believe
he was shot.
I believe that to be true. That's why, because he didn't want it to go out that his shoes had lifts in them. So, as I said, I was at the rally with the veterans. I was talking to the father and daughter really for a long time.
David, I'm gonna let you talk for a second. I got to go answer the door. I think Ronnie's trying to get in here, but I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna put you on. I don't know.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So anyway, what happens is I'm at this rally, and they were the father and the daughter were seated on the ground, so I didn't want to stand over them, so I got down, and when I got to get up, I forgot that I don't bounce up the way I used to. So again, I'm 73, and I'm not as spry as I was, and Trump is older, Trump is heavier, so we'll see. Now, people will say, and I've heard it already, oh, they won't make a big deal out of that. Or why don't they? They will. But see, with Trump, ladies and gentlemen, there's a 500. Now, that's hyperbole. I won't do that. I'll go with 500. I was going to say 500 million. But there are 500 legitimate news stories to pursue right now. And you can't do them all on a daily basis. For example, here's one. They say, but they don't really. I haven't seen any rationale why, because it's just they have to cover something. I believe we're up to 18 now. Former allies have said, "Do not visit the United States; it is unsafe."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've also got the idea of certainly what's happening in Los Angeles will not appease that. They're talking about what maybe one of our Canadian listeners, we have quite a few, can give me an actual number, but I think I read somewhere where they expected by the end of summer to look at 70% of Canada's normal tourism not appearing in the United States. You know how much money that is?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, David, if I could add, I don't know if you've read it. This was today, I believe. I didn't read the whole story, but apparently within the Republican Party, there is a movement to get rid of marijuana sales in the country. And they said that most of this is because of the alcohol industry has been losing, generally losing some of the revenue. And this is exactly with Russia. And one of the reasons why they don't have pot is because vodka rules. So
well, and you add to that, and you're absolutely right. You also add to that. That is a very powerful lobby, the alcohol lobby.
Oh,
no
absolutely.
question about that.
And tobacco too.
But there's also even more powerful is the health industry. And they certainly don't like marijuana because you can't charge $300 for a reefer.
Right.
and they don't get any of that reefer money. It goes somewhere else.
Right.
And marijuana should have been legalized. It should have been legalized in
a long time ago.
A long time ago.
In the 1920s. I mean, actually, in the Bohemian area, they were doing it. So you could.
And basically, just to touch on that and then move on. Almost every study that has been done says that marijuana is less harmful to society than alcohol. I always use this story, but I think it just really struck me. George Pelecanos, who, if anybody out there likes noir writing, he's just brilliant. He's an author from D.C., grew up here. He was also one of the screenwriters for both The Wire and Treme. Works with David Simon, creator of The Wire. But anyway, George said a couple times when I was listening to him in interviews, he said, because of what I write, I spend a lot of time with police. He said, and I've gone with them on so many ride-alongs that I can't even count them. He said, I've never been at a domestic where marijuana was involved. I've never not been at a domestic where alcohol wasn't a factor. And, and that's anecdotal, but it's still pretty much true. The sky hasn't fallen, Veg, and it never.
Canada always has it right. You know what I mean? It's just.
Veg, I got to say that too. The Canadian people, and I know they have pricks and things too. I got that, but the ones that I've always met have always just seemed to be a little nicer than many Americans. And of course, you and I have debated that, Brian, because where the nice people are. On the surface is in the South, but they're not nice once you get through that first, after you get that second level. New Yorkers just run around in a tizzy. But with Canadians, and I wonder about this, and I would defer to anybody if this is a question, not a statement. They are a little bit more homogeneous than we are. Or at least that's been my appearance. That seemed when you have the French, part of Montreal, and you have their native Canadian indigenous populations. But does that have any factor in it? Certainly, you see disputes about whether socialized medicine is good or socialized medicine is bad. I can tell you this: with socialized medicine, everybody gets a shot at it. What we have here with private does not. I had surgery on Wednesday for cataracts. Get another one. Get the other eye done next Wednesday. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have insurance. We have a friend again, and this is directly related to Trump's and Musk's cuts. Who her mother is now placed in the care of hospice. The physician thinks it might be as long as 6 months before she dies. And so they were looking into some things. The cheapest they could find, she needs 24-hour care, or they wanted to give her 24-hour care, was $42 an hour. Okay? Now, in and of itself, the $42, if it all went to the caregiver, right. But it doesn't even have that. Almost every caregiver is on some kind of aid because they don't make enough, to live. So, and that problem, I think it's bad now, Brian, with the advent of AI, and it's only going to get better, with the advent of robotics, and that's only going to get better, and with the idea of driverless vehicles, and that is a fact to be here to stay, and somebody other than Musk will be able to stabilize that. Do you realize how many jobs will be lost?
Yeah.
And so what?
Well, I could understand how mostly everybody will lose their jobs in the next 100 years, But the transition period is the problem, and that's what we're going through right now.
And that's always bad because think of the transition. We went from an agrarian society to an industrial society, and that was rough. Okay, that was really
Absolutely.
rough. Then we went from an industrial society to a society of information and technology, and that's been even rougher. And part of that is the fact that really to be adept in that techno info field, you have to have schooling. You can't, there's some, savants who pick it up. And where in the industrial age, if you worked hard, were willing to work, you could make a decent living. Where Brian and where I lived and Brian lives now, it had the second largest glass plant in the world there. And many people were able to get homes, cars, and put 2 or 3 kids through college based on that salary. Those kinds of jobs really don't exist anywhere. Industrial jobs, they don't, and they're not coming back. Trump can sit there all day and dangle it, and anybody who believes that is 100. You might as well believe that the world is flat because the world ain't flat, and those jobs aren't coming back. Now, Brian, we were talking about the California situation. Let's put you on the spot for a minute. You're Gavin Newsom, or as President Trump calls him, Gavin Newscum. But his wife, Melania, who we haven't seen for how many weeks now, again made being nice a priority. So, fuck the Trumps. But anyway, I don't think they are fucking, probably. That could be one of the problems. Or not fucking each other anyway. But what would you do? You're Governor Newsom. Now, we'll put a couple things on the table. Number one, you've got this street battle going on. Number two, also last week, Trump said that he was considering not sending any money to California. Okay. Governor Newsom then said, well, then we won't send you any federal tax money. And when that happens, that's going to be, if it does happen, that's going to be very interesting. So what would you do, Brian? You're not the
I love what Newsom, I would actually do it, though. I think that's just a scare tactic. I don't know what Trump would do. You have to just wait and see. But if there's any way that a state government, can withhold those taxes. See, the thing is that Trump's already warned him that they will arrest him if he gets involved in any way. And you know what? Maybe he ought to just do it, but at least put it in. You get no money from us. And look, this California is like any European country right now. It's so powerful. It would destroy the American economy.
Well, isn't it? I think it's now, isn't it like the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world?
Right,
just
fifth,
the state of
right.
California. So yeah, that would now that let's talk about that. Henry David Thoreau, who like all our revered writers, was not a very nice person and had some really bad hygiene habits, as you research it. But he did have some pretty good ideas from time to time, and one was he said, something like along these lines. When injustice prevails, the only just place for a man to find himself is in prison. But that's a big step. He went, right, because he refused to pay taxes, and he was jailed for a period of time. But he was jailed in his home jail. So to ask Gavin Newsom or anyone to go to jail is not something that, you can make the ask.
Eugene Debs did it.
Well, yes. But also, here's the other thing that we've done. It was one thing to say, yeah, okay, I'll go to. Now they're sending the prisoners out of the country. Think about that. Would they? I don't know that they could do that with a prominent person, but they certainly can do that. Now, the other thing is this impact about what you're saying in California. That's going on at different places. I know I have a young writer that I still stay in touch with who's actually works at immigration in Seattle. And 2 things have happened in his office. One is they've installed a jail in the office. And he said that's something that they're doing all over the country, is getting temporary holding facilities, right? Mm-hmm. But he said also what they're doing, they are offering bonuses for people who will leave immigration services and go to ICE. Now, a person with any sense of conscience is not going to do that, right? But a lot of people, what if they say, okay, you don't go you're fired. I mean, what do you do in those cases? It's not as clear cut. It's not as black and white, as we would like it to be, or as it should be. So they're complicated by life's decisions. Now, the other thing that will happen, while some people get incensed, some people will now want to stay away because of what's happening in California, right? Mm-hmm. And I would advise anyone, who does go to, so keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, know what to do in the event of something happening. Don't get swept away in the moment. If you sense danger, get the hell out. It's always better to live in a resistance movement like this. It's better to live another day.
Right. And I think they shouldn't use any violence whatsoever. Just
no. But see, that unfortunately, that goes against a basic tenet of human nature. Right. We could get all kinds of.
You're in crowds. You're in the heat of the moment. We don't know what will happen, especially if the ICE does shoot somebody or beat somebody or.
And I mean, can you imagine? You're seeing, and there have been instances. I mean, they're taking away a 4-year-old kid who's screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy."
Right. What are you going to do?
I don't know. I really don't know. Now, again, the focus will be on D.C. this weekend with the Nazi military parade, and that's the only way to describe it. Well, you could let's just call it a totalitarian fascist parade.
Right.
It's not America. It's not American. Now, what I think is, as I look at this now, it's tragic because Trump does not have a majority of Americans behind him. He doesn't. We're still at that third, and a third. So a third are opposed to him. A third just sat out the election for some reason, thought it wasn't important to vote. I hope they're having second.
No, if they didn't think then, it was pretty easy, Dave. They're not thinking now. It was,
but I will say this, Brian, and I'm not being, not rosy glasses and optimistic. But if you're looking now, there's been about 4 reports of different towns that actually went for Trump. And now that they're in there taking their people, they're a little upset. So, again, the point is I don't see Trump ever gaining any more support. What he has right now is the top. He can only lose. I don't see him gaining any. And I also thought, Brian, it was interesting. I thought every veteran, and I didn't even, it wasn't a huge, I mean, few thousand. I mean, that's huge, big, but not huge for D.C. But every veteran there would have been potentially a Republican voter in the old days. Just about every one of them, because the Republicans are the ones who spoke highly of veterans, who kind of were the patriots, or at least perceived themselves as being patriots, and took action as sane. Let's take another thing. Okay, both Jamie Crockett and AOC, it's been indicated that they might be arrested at some point. Let's say that happens. Somebody prominent. What does that do? What about the investigations into Joe Biden now? Okay, if he were to try to, and you don't know with Trump, like you say, oh, he would never do that. Well, you don't know that. There's
right. You don't know what you don't know.
Remember, the old. I always think of this like the old limbo. When you said the limbo and the limbo rock. How low can you go? Well, with Trump, there's no bottom. There's just no bottom. If you can think it, he might do it.
Right.
Now, he says.
I mean, Dave, do you think he is mentally at the point of no return where he's going to make these kind of crazy?
It has to be. It has to be. I mean, it doesn't matter where he really is on the spectrum, and I don't mean that as we say on the spectrum of autism. I'm talking about the spectrum of whack. Mm-hmm. He can do things out of anger. He can do things out of spite. He can do things out of encroaching senility. He may have dementia. There's still quite a bit of belief that he pops Adderall, and I think there is some support to that theory, because when you are tweeting at 2 and 3 consistently in the morning, and you're his age, I think you're using something.
And let's not forget with narcissism. I mean, if you were a deep narcissist, I mean, there are a lot of unmet needs and needs for attention. And it's this constant need for attention that the narcissist needs. And he cannot feel good unless he has a constant jolt of positivity coming his way.
Well, yeah, and it's it's both. It's interesting. Like you can't have it both ways. He gets a lot of play, in terms of people noticing that, but it's not that. It has to be in his thing too. Like, it can't be negative. It has to be positive. His narcissism. In other words, you have to agree that he knows it all, can do it all. And I know this is petty, but anybody who speaks of themselves in the third person, like he does, there's something to fuck wrong with you.
That is fucked up.
Big time.
Well, a narcissist would speak in the third person.
And that's part of what we have. Now the thing that I pretty much decided, I think I know a little bit about Trump, but the one area I'm not sure is he just completely delusional, or is some of this a con? I don't mean he's faking anything. It's just, I don't know. Think about it for a moment. He is by all historians, 125 of them got together and they ranked the presidents, and he had the distinction of being the 40. And if you had a second term, you were re-rated again. You were rated on your term. So he had the distinction of being the 46th and 47th at the bottom, or the worst two presidents of all time. Now, of course, he doesn't see it that way. The other thing would be, if I were his family, and I know it's not a normal family. I mean, there aren't any normal families. But if he were my dad, I would think I'd be worried about him. Well, think about it. Wouldn't you be worried about him? He got assassinated. I mean, got attempted assassination. You don't hear anything about that.
Right. I think that's where you have to forget about the words that are spoken, and you have to read the body language of people.
Correct.
And I think that's the only way you're going to get anything really out of it. I mean, it's very difficult because we're so used to listen. Well, when we can listen to the words, to pay attention to that. But I think sometimes you just have to use the nonverbal cues. And I think you're right. I mean, why didn't they react in a certain way? And that just is so puzzling. All I had to do is see Trump with Epstein. You could see how he's getting into the party. That tells me something different than when he says, "Well, I wasn't into the young kids like he was," and blah blah blah. Yeah, well, fuck you. You're full of shit. Look what you just did.
And that's, I think, that. Okay, on a broad macro. What is it? Macro and micro. On a broad macro scale, the Trump has done a lot of damage a lot of ways. But I think the death of truth, which he had help with, it wasn't solely him, but it was pretty much him. I mean, look, all politicians lie. All people lie. They manipulate.
I'll say this: the manipulation is the key to get what they want, right? Which is a form of a lie. I mean, I'm not trying to debate you on that, David.
No. I mean, yeah, and that you're right. I mean, but they do, because again, most of them have a very to run for all,
and they have to market themselves. I'm not trying to make excuses, but
no, and you're right, Brian. I mean, you have to have an ego, right? Mm-hmm. And that puts you in a certain group, okay? Right. And then you have to make yourself somewhat vulnerable by putting yourself out there, right? Mm-hmm. But everybody has the skeletons too, so depending on how you handle it. Now, that's another thing Trump has done. I counted in his initial run, I counted 17 times before he was sworn in where I said he was done. All the way from grab him by the pussy all the way down to just some other things. Right. And I was wrong each and every time. Now, here's one for you, Brian. I mean, it's like debating how many angels can fit on the head of a pin, but the idea of it is, if it had been a man against him the first time, do you think it would have made a difference? In other words, is America just simply not ready to recognize that a woman can be even more capable than a man of running the country? But obviously, I'm in a minority, I guess.
Well, I think it goes back to religion. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to like it, but it's a very patriarchal system, and it shows in the way they treat people. They're like, for example, Christianity is supposed to be the religion of forgiving, and there's no forgiving. They're going after your ass. It's just an indictment. You talked about truth what has happened to the Jews. There's really, and you said it yourself about America was never great. Well, I can also say that we've never really had a lot of truths.
No,
It's too hard to accept, the reality of life. And I know I'm getting philosophical, but there's so much bullshit coming out of that poison called religion. I mean, that's what at least in my state of tune.
Well, I would say that one of the great problems in the world, and we have, I put on most of my posts when I talk about Christianity, yes, there are good Christians, but there are bad Christians and there are deluded Christians who think they are. Yeah, Judy. Yeah. Okay. Yep. What? Certainly, history proves you out. I mean, how can you debate that? I mean, it's true. And I wonder with Kamala, which she actually had 3 strikes against her. Okay, a woman appearing to be, and indeed of African American descent, which also had an immigrant side, in there. So, that's like, wow, we can't do that.
And a strong woman too. I mean, if anyone with a strong personality, they see that as a threat.
Well, think about it.
You should be happy.
You said before, you have to have an ego, and what does it say? A woman has to work at least 4 times as hard to have the same job as a man, and then gets paid, at least 15% less or more than the man does. Right. So, and and you can't go back, but I do think about how could we have done this? I mean, without assassination. I mean, I'm not a fan of assassination, but if Joe Biden, and Joe, if you were here, props for running and stopping Trump, but no prompts for staying past your expiration date. I can't give them to you. Sorry, Joe. Mm-hmm. And even there, did you see where his? I thought this was interesting. His press secretary,
yes,
who, was the first.
Joe and I were talking about that this week.
An LGBTQ person has now come out and is leaving the Democratic Party with but I've seen some conflicting reasons why. But one of the ones that seems to be is she doesn't like the way they treated Joe. Well, I'm sorry. Joe Biden, by the time of that debate, I don't know when it started, but by the time of that debate, was in no condition to run the country. He wasn't.
I think the minute he lost control of that debate, which was the first minute, that should have been the cue. Big changes now. Let's have a convention or whatever. They don't even necessarily have the convention. They just have to prepare better.
But what happened was, though, too, Brian, it is hard. Okay. In the book that I still haven't finished yet because I'm doing so many other things, but in the original Sin, there are so many reasons why Biden could not, being Biden, okay, not good reasons, but being Biden, there were so many reasons why he couldn't step aside, and unfortunately, as I said, he could have gone down with the greatest of all time.
He still did a good job considering the situation he was in.
Not arguing that. It's just that his refusal. It's like the athlete, right? In a way, who's taken you to the pennant 5 times, but he's done, and he lets the winning run in for the other team, in the World Series, that kind of thing. Or, it's much more important.
And by the way, let me add this in because I know this isn't like maybe perhaps the platform to talk about Raisa Gorbachev, but this is the same attitude of the conservative public that happened, in Russia. It wasn't so much Gorbachev with the Russians because he did give them freedom, but they always had this idea that this Raisa was controlling the whole thing, and they didn't like the fact that a woman had that kind of power. And this is the same thing here, and it's disgusting. I can't stand it, and I don't know that it'll ever change as long as we have these same people in power.
I always use people I know, and I said, yeah, that would work real well in my own marriage. That would last about 2 minutes if I tried to say that I'm better, and I'm not. I mean, I admit that. And I think, and the reason that I think women would be better than men, not any woman, certainly not Marjorie Taylor Greene, but a decent representative. I think, I don't know I don't think it's biological, but they do have maternal instincts. They're raised that way, and their conflict resolution tactics are different.
Right.
Biden, even Biden, I'll get him behind the place and punch him in the nose. Remember originally, that had been a fight worth watching. Biden versus Trump. So, Brian, we've got the next week coming up. We know what's going to happen at the end of the week. There's going to be this something that I just never envisioned, ever. And I was wrong again, because Sinclair Lewis was right. It can happen here. It is happening here. All right. Do you think, you said, and I'd love to be able to disagree with you. I can't. I think it's only going to get worse for a period of time. I don't see any way that it cannot. There's too many unresolved issues that are not going to be resolved quickly. Do you think, I'll do it this way. Do you think if there was irrefutable proof legally, of course, there'd still be Trump supporters who would claim it was false, that he did have sex with underage girls? Do you think that would have? I don't think it'd have anything to.
Well, I think
I don't think it would have anything to do.
This is going to rate to technology, Dave. And you and I have had private discussions about in classrooms with the phones, but there is a precedent, not a precedent set, but there is a behavior that is going around the world essentially, where you get, the kids are on TikTok, everything's 30 seconds a minute,
right.
And so the concentration level is kind of built into some type of time standard, like a 1 minute or a half a minute, and which what makes it so difficult as a teacher to be able to execute a lesson in 40 minutes, because you're dealing with these people just going in and out. They're doing the lesson, they're doing TikTok, they're doing the lesson, they're daydreaming about their girlfriend that they may get or something like that. It just creates so many problems. So when you say, what would happen if they did find the files, I don't think there is that fortitude to even pay attention to a news story. You said it yourself with ABC,
Yeah, I know. Well, I saved where the clock on the wall is telling you time. So I saved my last comment. I knew I was going to talk about just briefly. When things become personal, they have more impact. I mean, that's just a great. So I had a personal dealing with Donald Trump and his regime this week. Son Michael, I'm going to give you a shout out because he said he promised he'd watch the show. He's in Tokyo for a couple of weeks. But anyway, one of his graduate students, was seeking a job at the White House. Okay. And of course, she asked Michael to write a recommendation for him. And so he calls me, he says, Dad, I don't know what to do. He said, part of me wants to just say, go fuck Trump, but she's a really good kid. She's a good student. And I said, well, you write it legit. I said, just write it legit. And then it's up to them. But there are 4 questions that you have to answer that basically are different, disguised of, will you support Donald Trump no matter what? I read the questions. It's there.
You would have thought that the name was Stalin,
Well, but what's interesting, Brian, on that? Even Stalin and Hitler didn't do all the shit out in public that Trump's doing. Think about that for a moment. They did a lot behind closed doors, and there's not a whole lot of closed doors here. And he's just doing it, which is ludicrous to me. I mean, not only the fact he's doing it, but he's doing it that openly. So I just think, we'll leave this. There's something wrong with Donald Trump. And because Donald Trump is in the White House, there's something wrong with America. That's my close.
And that's a great way to end it. And I'm going to leave it there, Dave. Dave, thank you very much. Today was really an interesting show. Let's not forget, folks, about Sandy and Environmental Coffee House.
Yes.
Just go on Facebook and try to contact her. I know she's got a GoFundMe going or something like that. But we'll be glad to have her come on here if she needs to.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be not a problem. So, Dave, thank you very much, and thank you, everybody.
As always, Brian. And I think
please subscribe.
A lot of the time, you're not in it for the props, and you know that I pick on you all the time. It took you 3 weeks to learn something that you should have known. Is the idea of if you like this show, if you think it's important, all the kudos go to Brian. because without Brian, there was no show. No, seriously, Brian.
No, I mean, I
You're the
initiated
one-
it, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, that's
It was going to be us working on this anyway. It was just that was what was leading.
But that's true. But you still have to give the props.
Thank you. Thank you.
Same thing I always do when I go here. It's like a speaker and interview. I always go up to the person, like say it's the Smithsonian. I find somebody from Smithsonian to say thank you, because without you, they don't have to talk. So you might have a shiny head that bothers people in the show, but when I say that, I thank you for asking me to do the show, because it gives me an opportunity to vent.
Right. Hey, by the way, let's not forget Substack. Please subscribe to us. You can find me on Substack. Dave, you're going to get a lot busier on Substack, so please subscribe on Substack, because that's where we get to really concentrate on writing something more refined and polished.
I actually put today on my Facebook page, based on that ABC thing, which really disturbed me. ABC, Washington Post, these people that I thought were something aren't. But with Substack, you've got all the people that are being let go. Jim Acosta, let go, he's on Substack. Joy Reid, let go, she's on Substack. People that haven't done TV for your Stephen Becker.
Ukrainian journalists are on there, and some of the Russians who were expelled. So this is the place to go. This is not bullshit like let's look at the squirrel and the skateboard. This is some real shit.
No. There's some, and I'll tell you who else I really admire, and I would from there. And I think right now, if it came down to, I really like Robert Reich. Who was the
yeah, he's all right. Yeah.
No, he's got some really good ideas.
I have a friend. She has suggested Robert Reich, and I did check him out. I mean, I know who he is. I mean,
the problem is, Brian. Again, but the idea of it is there's so many good voices on Substack. That you.
You can't have all of them because you keep getting these email reminders. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, no, but but I'm saying so. And don't feel that you have to spend anything, because you don't. I don't subscribe to any of them, but I get enough information that I can make determinations. Just and some of them don't really need the money, but it's still that's nice. Substack is a really good thing. And
we're free, by the way. At least I know I am.
Yeah.
So you're not going to collect any money on Substack. My writing's not good enough yet for that anyway. So,
all right, Brian. Be good.
All right, Dave. Thank you. See you, everybody.